I want to start today by speaking directly to you.
Yeah.
Yes, you listening to us right now.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling you might be wrestling with something that I struggle with almost every single day.
So common.
It really is. It's this exhausting, almost invisible tension between wanting to achieve big things, building the career, hitting the milestones, making a tangible impact, and simultaneously craving just a moment of profound, quiet inner peace.
Right.
It's that restless push for more growth, more optimization, more success. But right alongside that drive, there's this quiet, creeping dread, the feeling of, is this actually getting me to where I want to be? Or am I running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up?
The treadmill is real.
So real. Anyway, welcome to our deep dive. Today, we are looking at a really fascinating stack of research. We're blending ancient Eastern philosophy texts with modern neuroscience and contemporary business case studies. And the goal is to unpack a radically different way to look at how we live and work.
And that tension you just described, that's exactly why we are here. The core mission of our deep dive today is to completely reframe how we view success, change, and specifically, loss.
Loss is a scary word for a lot of us.
Oh, absolutely. In our modern, hyper-productive culture, letting go is almost exclusively framed as a failure.
Yeah.
It means you couldn't hack it, it means you lost your edge or you gave up. But the insights we are drawing from these diverse sources point to something entirely different. Letting go isn't a failure at all.
Okay.
When applied correctly, it is the ultimate strategic advantage for building a life that actually means something.
I mean, I am going to need some convincing on this.
I figured you would.
Because my default setting, and I think the default setting for a lot of high achievers listening right now, is totally counter to that. Modern culture is just completely obsessed with optimizing, with winning, with accumulating.
We measure our success entirely in gains.
Entirely.
Yeah.
It's all about higher revenue, more followers, better metrics, grabbing the next promotion. The idea of losing something or voluntarily stepping back feels like, I don't know, career suicide.
Or a deep personal failure.
Right. We are actively trained to never ever release our grip, white-knuckling all the way.
We absolutely are conditioned that way. But the ancient texts we're looking at offer a radically different perspective that we just desperately need to bring into the modern light.
Let's hear it.
It's the idea that loss is not the opposite of success.
Okay.
It is its necessary companion. Without the willingness to lose, true growth remains completely impossible.
So you literally have to lose to grow.
Yes. Consider the image of a tree in autumn.
Okay, a tree.
If you had an entirely untrained eye-like, if you had somehow never seen the seasons change in your life, you would look at that tree dropping its leaves and you'd think it was dying.
Right, because it's turning brown and falling apart.
Exactly. Its vibrant green is surrendered to the wind, its branches are laid completely bare, but the tree isn't dying, it is preparing.
Preparing for winter. Because it's shedding what it can't sustain through the cold.
Precisely. It sheds those leaves so that when spring comes, new life can actually emerge from the exact same roots.
Wow.
And notice this, the tree doesn't mourn its leaves with regret. It doesn't fight the wind to hold on to them.
It just lets them go.
It lets go with this incredible grace because it understands that release is a fundamental part of renewal. I refer to this concept as intelligent surrender.
Intelligent surrender. I like that phrasing.
Yeah, it is not passive resignation. It's a highly strategic alignment with the natural laws of existence.
Intelligent surrender. When we look at our own human lives, I feel like we build these invisible cages for ourselves that prevent that kind of surrender.
Cages of identity.
Yes, exactly. We cling so tightly, and not just to our material stuff or our money, but to our identities. We tell ourselves, I am the reliable one, or I am the high achiever.
I am the ultimate caregiver.
Right, and those self-concepts give us a sense of stability.
For a while.
But when a change in our life demands that we evolve beyond those labels, that stability turns into a cage.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Like you get a promotion that requires you to step back and let your team lead instead of controlling everything yourself. Or you go through a breakup that completely dissolves your identity as a partner. Suddenly, you aren't just dealing with external change.
You're experiencing an internal earthquake.
A massive internal earthquake.
Because that earthquake is the shattering of the who am I now. And it is terrifying because we have confused our temporary labels with our permanent self.
I want you the listener, to just pause for a second and consider this in your own life right now. What identity are you currently gripping way too tightly?
Good question.
What label are you holding on to that might actually be acting as a cage right now, keeping you stuck, rather than serving as the foundation it used to be?
That is a crucial question to sit with, because when we resist that chain, when we fight that internal earthquake to maintain the cage, we start to suffer.
We really do.
And there are very specific, recognizable symptoms to this kind of stagnation.
Let's talk about those symptoms, because they are incredibly real for anyone trapped in the modern hustle.
The burnout.
Yeah, it's that subtle, persistent burnout. The quiet dread that settles into your chest at like 4 p.m. on a Sunday evening when you think about the week ahead.
Sunday scaries.
Exactly. It's a growing sense of dissonance, like you're playing a character in your own life and reading from a script someone else wrote.
No. Yeah.
Some people even describe having recurring dreams of being trapped or driving a car from the back seat.
I've heard that one.
You haven't necessarily failed at anything on paper. You might even be thriving externally. But internally, the engine is sputtering.
Ancient wisdom traditions actually have a very precise diagnosis for this exact modern condition.
What do they call it?
In Buddhist philosophy, this suffering stems from a concept called upadana.
Upadana.
Right. It loosely translates to clinging. It's the insistence that reality must conform to our specific desires and expectations. The Buddha offered a core diagnostic tool to explain why our conventional strategies for finding security keep failing us. He pointed out that all phenomena share a specific set of characteristics.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is that everything is impermanent. The term for this is anicca.
Wait, if everything is fundamentally impermanent, how do I even set a 5-year goal? That feels totally counterintuitive to how an ambitious person operates.
It does sound that way at first.
I mean, if the ground is always moving, why build anything at all?
That is the exact friction most driven people feel when they first hear this. But acknowledging anicca doesn't mean you don't build. It means you change how you build.
How so?
You build knowing the market will shift, your energy levels will change, and the goalposts will move. Because when you ignore impermanence and try to freeze a moment in time, you run straight into the second characteristic.
Which is?
Dukkha. This means that things are ultimately unsatisfactory when we cling to them as a permanent source of happiness.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense when you think about the moving goalpost of success. You grind for the promotion, you finally get it, you feel a high for about 2 weeks.
If that.
Right, and then you are immediately looking at the next rung on the ladder. The promotion itself didn't permanently satisfy you.
Because you relied on a temporary condition to provide lasting peace. And that brings us to the third characteristic, anatta.
Meaning?
Which means devoid of a fixed, permanent self. You are not a static entity. The version of you that set that 5-year goal might not be the same version of you that actually reaches it.
So we suffer because we are trying to build a concrete house on shifting sand.
Precisely.
We exhaust our nervous systems and fragment our attention trying to lock down a reality and an identity that is fundamentally designed to change.
That is the perfect way to summarize it. We are fighting the basic nature of reality, and we are losing.
So how do we actually fix this?
We train the mind.
But practically speaking, if the root cause is our clinging to an impermanent world, what is the practical toolkit for the ambitious person who still needs to operate in reality? Because we can't all just drop our responsibilities and go live in a cave to meditate.
We certainly can't, and the philosophy doesn't ask us to. The tool is mindfulness, but I really want to rebrand that word for a moment.
Please do, because it's become such a buzzword.
It really has. In corporate culture, mindfulness gets thrown around as a simple relaxation technique, a way to just chill out so you can work harder.
Take 10 deep breaths so you can answer 80 more emails.
Exactly. It is not that. Mindfulness is radical attention training.
Radical attention training.
Yes. It's the practice of moving from being entirely identified with a problem to merely observing it. And the modern neuroscience backing this up is profound.
I love the neuroscience angle.
Yeah.
What actually happens in the brain when you train your attention like this?
Regular meditation literally thickens the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex, that's the logic center, right?
That is the part of your brain responsible for executive decision-making, complex problem-solving, and emotional regulation. At the very same time, it shrinks and calms the amygdala.
Which is the fear center.
Exactly, your brain's fear and stress center. So you aren't just becoming more peaceful, you are literally altering your brain's physical structure to become sharper, more adaptive, and vastly more capable under intense pressure.
That is incredible. I'd love to see a practical application of this. Give me a real-world example of someone taking this ancient diagnostic tool and this neuroscience and applying it to the modern hustle.
Well, the sources outline a fascinating case study of a specific tech founder.
Oh, perfect.
This is someone who played the modern success game perfectly. She worked 80-hour weeks for years, practically lived on Slack, hustled harder than anyone else in her sector, and she successfully built a highly profitable company.
The dream.
By every market standard, she had won. But internally, she was completely hollow.
The nightmare.
She was burnt out, estranged from her family, and emotionally numb to the point where her own company's milestones meant nothing to her.
The classic Pyrrhic victory. You win the war, but you completely lose your soul in the process.
She finally hit a breaking point where her physical health started failing. She ended up going on a silent meditation retreat.
A silent retreat, that's a drastic shift.
It was. Sitting there in the silence, separated from the noise, the metrics dashboards, and the constant validation loops, she had a massive realization.
What happened?
Stripped of all her titles and achievements, she heard this quiet truth inside herself. She realized, I built this entire empire to prove I was worthy, but I was never unworthy to begin with.
I was never unworthy to begin with. That shifts the entire paradigm.
It changes everything.
My instinct hearing that is that she came back from the retreat, sold the company, and moved to an ashram to find peace. Is that what happened?
Exactly the opposite. That is what most people assume, but she didn't quit. And that is the brilliance of this approach. She took that profound internal realization and she returned to her life, but she rebuilt her company from a totally different foundation.
How did that look practically?
She instituted actual rigid boundaries. No meeting Fridays. She stopped answering emails at midnight. She brought genuine presence to her meetings instead of looking at her phone under the table.
Radical presence.
Yes. She fostered a team culture that was rooted in human dignity rather than just raw output and extraction.
I just marvel at this alchemy. It's the perfect translation of inner clarity turning directly into outer strategy. Because I imagine the business didn't just survive this shift, it probably thrived.
Oh, absolutely.
When the leader stops operating from panic, the whole system stabilizes.
Her revenue stabilized, her impact actually deepened, and for the first time in years, she slept through the night.
Wow.
It proves that the operating system of non-attachment works infinitely better than the operating system of fear.
Okay, I need to push back on you right there because this is where I know a lot of people listening, really wrestle with this concept.
Bring it on!
Non-attachment. To a high achiever, hearing the word non-attachment sets off alarm bells.
Of course it does.
The immediate fear is, if I'm not attached to my goals, it means I don't care.
Yeah.
If I don't care, I'm going to lose my competitive edge. I'm going to get complacent and someone else is going to eat my lunch.
That is the most common and arguably the most destructive misconception about this philosophy.
So clarify it for us.
The counterintuitive truth we find in these sources is that non-attachment does not mean non-action. It doesn't mean apathy.
What does it mean?
It means you care deeply, but you hold lightly.
Care deeply, hold lightly. How does that actually play out in a high-stakes scenario?
Well, when you aren't desperately clinging to a very specific, rigid outcome to validate your self-worth, you create immense agility.
Agility. Because you're not locked in.
Right. You can pivot instantly when the market data shifts because you aren't stubbornly tied to your original idea. You can apologize freely when you realize you were wrong because your ego isn't tied to being flawless.
That makes a lot of sense.
You can walk away from a toxic, highly profitable deal because you aren't operating from a place of scarcity. That isn't weakness or complacency. That is the
Facing a sudden, terrifying market crash.
Okay, leader A and leader B.
Let's say leader A is absolutely terrified of losing his status, his identity as a winner, and his wealth. So he panics.
Naturally.
Because he is deeply attached, he doubles down on denial, he starts cutting corners ethically, he hides crucial financial information from the team, and he makes erratic decisions entirely out of a fear of losing what he has.
And then you look at leader B, who practices non-attachment. Leader B still feels the fear. She isn't a robot. The neuroscience shows the amygdala still registers threats, but she sees the situation clearly. Because her core worth isn't terrified of losing the CEO identity, she gathers her team, shares the brutal truth of the numbers, and invites collective problem solving. She leads from integrity, not panic.
So between those two, who was going to find the innovative solution? Who is going to inspire fierce loyalty in their team to weather the storm?
Leader B, it's not even a contest.
It's almost like there's a blueprint for this kind of resilient business leadership hidden in these ancient teachings.
You can actually map the Buddhist concept of the Eightfold Path, which is usually viewed purely as spiritual doctrine, as a profound business blueprint.
Give me an example of that.
For instance, the first principle is right speech. In the corporate world, that translates to profound honesty in your negotiations, transparency with your board, and clear, compassionate feedback to your employees.
Okay, then there's right livelihood. But can a business really survive asking if its work causes harm or healing in a cutthroat capitalist market? Doesn't ethics sometimes cost you the margin?
In the short term, maybe. But the case studies in our sources show that right livelihood becomes a compass for long-term fulfillment and brand loyalty.
People want to work for a company that does good.
Exactly. Employees don't burn out and quit when they believe their work heals rather than harms. Consumers increasingly abandon toxic brands. It is a long-term sustainability play.
That makes total sense.
And that ties directly into right effort. This is the concept of the middle way.
Right effort sounds like figuring out the difference between a sprint and a marathon.
That's a great way to frame it. It means not being too lax, but also not being too forceful. If you push too hard, you shatter your health and your team.
But if you do too little,
You lose momentum and the business dies. Right effort is about finding that dynamic, responsive sweet spot where effort is sustainable indefinitely.
all of this sounds beautiful in theory. Finding the middle way, leading with integrity, holding lightly. But life is messy. We fail. Things fall apart.
They absolutely do.
Businesses go under, we get fired, relationships end in heartbreak, we make huge, humiliating mistakes. What about the acute pain of all that? How does this philosophy handle the mud of real life?
To understand how to handle the messiness, we have to look at one of the most famous Buddhist symbols, the lotus flower.
The lotus.
The lotus doesn't grow in pristine, manicured gardens. It grows in dark, murky, muddy swamps.
Right.
But it blossoms perfectly pristine and radiant right above the surface of that swamp. The profound lesson of the lotus is that it doesn't reject the mud, it transforms it. The mud isn't an obstacle getting in the way of the flower. The mud is the actual nourishment.
So the failures, the grief, the deep doubts we experience, that is our mud.
Yes. Society tells us that experiencing those things means we have strayed from the path of success. But this perspective argues that the messiness is the very ground where your awakening and your growth take root.
No mud, no lotus.
Without the mud, there is absolutely no flower.
Let's pivot that idea of the mud to our personal lives, specifically our relationships. Because I think this is where our fear of loss and our instinct for clinging is the absolute most intense.
Without a doubt.
We grip so tightly to partners, often just out of a sheer terror of being alone or abandoned.
We often give endlessly in relationships, secretly hoping we can earn love or trap it so the person won't ever leave us. It's a very transactional way to love.
So how do we fix that?
The practice the texts offer here is something called metta, which translates to loving kindness. And crucially, it starts with yourself.
I have to admit, to a hyper-logical achiever like me, loving kindness sounds incredibly soft, almost like a vulnerability in a tough world.
It sounds soft until you realize the armor it provides.
The armor.
When you cultivate deep warmth and fullness within yourself first, your entire approach to intimacy transforms. You stop relating to your partner from a place of desperate, clawing need, and you start relating from a place of overflowing generosity.
That's a huge shift.
Intimacy stops being what I like to call a merger of two wounds, where you both expect the other to fix you, and it becomes a beautiful, dynamic dance between two whole, secure people.
A merger of two wounds. Wow.
Yeah.
They perfectly describe so many toxic dynamics I've seen.
But I do want to bring up a trap here that I notice when high achievers discover mindfulness.
Let's hear it.
Sometimes people get into this stuff, the non-attachment, the meditation, and they use it as an emotional shield. They think, if I am just enlightened enough, I will never have to feel pain again. I'll just float above it all and nothing will bother me.
That is a well-documented psychological trap called spiritual bypassing.
Spiritual bypassing.
And it is incredibly dangerous. It's this false, highly toxic idea that true spiritual growth means becoming emotionally bulletproof or detached from humanity. That is a total denial of the human experience.
Because we're meant to feel things.
The texts are very clear on this. Even the Buddha himself openly wept when his beloved disciple Sariputta died.
Even the Buddha cried. Exactly. True freedom isn't the absence of emotion. True freedom is the capacity to feel your grief, your anger, and your joy fully, without being completely ruled by them. You feel the deep pain of the loss, but you don't add the secondary suffering of resisting reality.
So how do we, the people listening to this deep dive right now, actually practice this? In a world that is constantly screaming at us through our phones to speed up, to numb out, and to acquire more, what does everyday rebellion actually look like?
It looks like instituting what I call rituals of resistance.
Rituals of resistance, I love that.
These are small, incredibly powerful daily acts that reclaim your sovereignty over your own attention. It can be as simple as taking 5 minutes of conscious, deliberate breathing in your car before you walk into a high-stakes meeting, just to center your nervous system.
What else? Give us something we can do today.
Take a daily walk outside without your headphones.
Oh, that's hard.
No podcasts, no music, no audiobooks, just you, the silence, and your physical environment.
Just being present.
Or practice a weekly digital sunset where you turn off all your screens an hour before bed and actually let your brain power down naturally. These aren't just wellness luxuries. In a culture that literally commodifies and sells your attention, taking it back is a necessary act of rebellion.
Synthesizing everything we've talked about today, from the intelligence of the autumn tree, to the tech founder finding her worth, the lotus growing in the mud, and these daily rituals of resistance, it brings us to a profound, ultimate realization.
It really does.
True success and spiritual success are the exact same thing. They aren't in conflict at all. The greatest loss you can ever experience in your life isn't the loss of your job, or a market crash, or even a relationship ending.
No.
The most devastating loss is the loss of your own authenticity. Climbing a ladder for decades only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall.
And finding the right wall is the true ground we all have to discover. I want to reassure everyone listening, when you finally practice that intelligent surrender, when you bravely release everything you've been clinging to so desperately, you realize something magical.
What's that?
You never actually lose anything essential. The jobs, the impressive titles, the relationships, they were always temporary vessels. What remains is the awareness that witnessed it all, your integrity, your capacity to care, your deepest truth.
That is so grounding.
So tomorrow, when the stress rises at work or panic sets in about a sudden change in your life, don't just take a deep breath. Inquire.
Ask the hard questions.
Ask yourself directly, what am I clinging to right now? Is this story I'm telling myself actually true? Is this heavy burden truly mine to carry?
That is exactly where the power lies. Stepping out of blind reaction and stepping into conscious response. I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We've talked about how the essence of who you are can never truly be lost, and how every ending is really just clearing necessary space in your life for something new.
Beautifully said.
So, what if the massive uncertainty you are feeling right now, that tight anxiety in your chest about the future, what if that isn't the universe testing your resilience?
Think about that.
What if it's actually the universe just waiting for you to stop fighting, so it can finally hand you exactly what you've been asking for all along? Think about it. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.